uh, zone pricing scheme, and we should understand that it's really nothing more than a shameful intent to sell the same old wine for a brand new bottle. And we're talking about really, I know Alex is saying it's really new and different, but really we're talking about Orwellian language to hide imposing tolls on the East River bridges, because coming over those bridges, so if you have it a few feet off the bridge or a block off the bridge, it's still a toll. And to say anything else is really disingenuous. So it's really recycling the old Bloomberg plan. Yes, there's other things, but that's, and especially the bottom one with what happened with the fixed NYC panel plan, it's no substantial difference other than the price. And a plan that's imposing tolls, it fails our economy and it ignores the fact that drivers of vehicles already pay high registration fees and surcharges and sales tax on repair and purchases and gas tax. These are already things that they are paying that can be tapped and do get tapped, when the state and the city do pass on funds to the MTA plan and to fund the MTA. What we need to look at when we're talking about funding the MTA and its capital plan, we really need to finance the plan and finance public transit in general, not with any ideological scheme, because people want to keep cars out and they think it'll keep cars out. And all the studies have shown it's no significant number that they're talking about. And in fact, the non-app vehicle cars have declined driving into Manhattan over the past decade. And there's no dispute about that. So really what we're talking about is almost in an anti-elitist sense, keeping the cars out, because obviously the folks who have the big dollars, they're not really price sensitive, last I've heard. And that's why we call it a toll tax. And I represent an organization called Keep NYC Congestion Tax Free. And so they've always called it a congestion tax. And I think tax remains the operative word when we're talking about tolls. As I pointed out at the outset, the drivers are already paying these other fees. And I think these people really are just talking about preventing driving without regard to the economic impact. And it's important to look at, to really distinguish New York and New York City from the other places where they've had according pricing or zone pricing or whatever, what you're talking about, because what's the central business district, or if you look at the financial district in downtown Manhattan, for example, it's no longer just a financial district. People are living there, whether it's not just from the growth of Battery Park City on the Hudson River side, but there's all sorts of apartments throughout the financial district, on Wall Street, on Water Street, Maiden Lane. It's different these days. And it's the same thing as you move uptown, and where it's essentially really almost like a mixed-use concept of the mixed-use development. And you have that even in downtown Brooklyn, where my son has lived the last few years, and he's lived in and around different parts of Brooklyn about probably the last 7 years, with only maybe about 1 year up in Hamilton Heights in Manhattan. My brother has lived here, as many, if you recognize the last name, Bierek, he's lived here for a long time, and some folks know where he works, but this is not about having him in that way. And so it's, I think it's important to just really recognizes that distinction, that it's not like we're just keeping people out of a business district. And also, when you look at businesses in the different areas, especially where there is some driving in, it's not just the people who live in communities or travel in communities that are buying in stores and patronizing restaurants and plays and the like. And these businesses depend on people who come in even by car. And if that number goes down just a little bit, that can make the difference in whether certain stores, businesses survive, and it's important. If you have a situation where all of a sudden a bunch of businesses fail, it has an impact on a block, it has an impact on a neighborhood. And you see that even, other places in the boroughs where for other reasons things like that occur. And we should not really be doing things that have adverse economic impacts when there are other ways to raise revenues that are sensible. We've, on our website, keepnycfood.com, we've outlined a whole bunch of different revenue measures. Some people have adopted some of them. I have some of them, my favorites about them. But when you look at them, you need revenues that are steady, and if the goal is to reduce cars coming in, that means there's gonna be less revenues unless you're gonna just keep raising the toll more and more. And that's not what the goal is. It's really about having steady revenues for transit. When congestion pricing was first talked about, what I usually call the grandchild of the original congestion tax, when they had that proposal coming in, when there was a Ravitch Commission, they came up with a payroll tax. And I think the council's gonna probably talk more about it. But even that is price sensitive, and when it first passed, there were a number of government entities, school districts on Long Island and others that had to pay into it, and they were eventually then cut out of that later on. So obviously that took money away from the system to begin with, and then there were issues of that fund getting raided anyway. And that's a whole other issue of the lockbox, which will be talked about. But when you can come up with steady, sustainable revenues, not that are price sensitive, you can do better with that. And a number of different proposals. One that I've had that I liked in particular is when you look at the permit fees, and I hope the council members are listening, when you look at the permit fees for closing streets or lanes, it's insignificant. It's better than rent stabilization, rent regulation, when you start looking at that, especially when you put trailers in there, and often what you see is sometimes private vehicles parked in some of those places where it's closed off. It's almost like, in a way, a placard system without a placard, if you will. And if you charge market rate, and so this is the number I'm giving you is from when we were studying this in 2008. If you charge market rate for those permits, you'd raise $500 million. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll come to that number right away, and I can imagine the builders and the real estate industry, they push back, for example. But if you look at that number, that's a more sustainable number, and it addresses, it might encourage, because there's an economic incentive now, to perhaps not have that street closed as long, and having that impact also on driving. So just